when I was a tiny kid, Walter Cronkite was the most trusted man in America. Today, the media is very, very, very far from that. What happened?
I think the word trust is the key word. The war on truth that was seen during the Trump years and continues to this day is really more than a war on truth. It's a war on trust. But I think trust has been eroding for decades. It's a generation-long event. Trump is just in some ways a dramatized part of it. This war on trust, it was underway in the 70s and 80s in some parts of the Republican Party. It was advantageous to the Republican Party to try to create an alternative to the mainstream media, an alternative to the Walter Cronkites. We see that with Fox News in the 90s, but also with the rise of talk radio, and then to some extent the rise of alternative social networks that's happening now. So what we see is a fragmenting, right, from the big three networks to dozens and to hundreds and to thousands, now to millions. And in that environment, trust has collapsed.
And nobody watches the same thing anymore, right? I mean, so it's not just a question of left versus right, but it's also there's no common narrative in the media, where when there were three big networks, there really were. Nicole, how did that happen, and how problematic is or isn't that for civil society?
Well, it comes from a lot of different sources. Of course, back in the 50s and 60s, conservatives were making the argument that you shouldn't watch liberal media. You should only trust conservative sources and only watch those. And that comes into connection with a big change that happens in the media in the 80s and 90s with the rise of cable. And that fragmentation of the media dial and that sort of fragmentation of the audience has an enormous effect on a kind of shared culture, shared information. So part of it is technological, right? Technology changes, cable, then the internet and social media allows you to kind of curate what you're watching more. It also gives rise to a kind of desire to make news more entertaining. And that emphasis on entertainment as the way of consuming news, that also changes what people expect from news, the kind of news that they're drawn to. It changes news values in really important ways that helps to contribute to that erosion in trust that Brian was talking about. And it really does matter because that lack of shared information, shared understanding does lead to a fragmentation of the culture, one that is, again, both technological, but also coming from the right, really purposeful as a way of getting their audiences to trust them more than other sources.